Welcome, everybody. We are back with another episode of The Off Angle here. Of course, I am your host, Scriv, joined by the co-host, Prodogo. I think we can say that at this point. We've got enough of them under our belt, so I think you're here to stay, I hope. Yeah, so we'll see about that in weeks to come. But for now, co-host Prodogo, we are, of course, joined once again by Yumi. We're here to talk all things EPL, really. We've got a little bit more to get into, but that's, I think, going to be the meat and potatoes. Maybe not the gravy, right? We're going to start with the gravy, I suppose, if to take this food analogy to its death. It's kind of an ongoing sort of story at this point. With Carlos and G2 and partying and doubling down and all that dirty rascal stuff that goes on behind the scenes in esports. Obviously, so the general kickoff. There's a guy on the internet. No one likes him, but apparently Carlos does. To be fair, right? Very quickly to address. I don't really know how that comes about as well as a thing. You know what I mean? It's like, we're partying post LEC or whatever it was, feeling good. Let's get controversial figures involved and, flown around the world to join our party when I don't know who else would really want them there either. Because it wasn't just, big man Tater, as I guess we're going to call him to try and circle around it.
Yeah, you said meat and potatoes. I thought you were going
You were going.
Oh, yo. I didn't even think. I didn't even think.
Yeah, and then you're like gravy.
Oh, man.
Keep gravy and meat onto one side, dude. Gravy and meat's EPL.
Yeah.
You got to give me those taters, man.
Well, there you go. Oh, God. And to be fair, the point that I'm making, there was also two of them, right? Because it's kind of, you got the big one, the bald one, is the...
I forgot that the other brother.
Yeah, right. Is the more controversial figure, but then he does also have a brother who's not really too dissimilar in terms of where opinions and philosophies on life, let's say, are at. So I really don't know. That's my main. It just perplexed me when I saw, because the thing is, I saw the video right at first, and I was kind of like, okay, he's just it's like a meme. There's people partying, we're also partying. And then I saw it like explode and, everyone, why is Carlos doing this? What's going on at G2? And I was like, is he getting in trouble for just uploading a video of the guy? And I had to go back and watch it and be like, oh wait, yeah, there is a frame, where like Carlos comes in with the drink or whatever. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that is a bit bad. But it just confused me. I was like, why have you asked this guy to come out with you? I don't understand. What's the deal?
I don't even know what the backstory of the party is, to be fair. Like, this probably came out a long time ago, but because I'm not glued to every inch of this particular potato, I'm really not sure how it came to be. How did it bake? How long was it in the oven? Where were the other people? Like, what was this, an esports party or was this something completely different? You know what I mean? Like, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's just a weird situation. I'm not really sure how to.
I think it was like their post LEC party. I don't follow League well enough, I guess.
They were like celebrating the fact that they made playoffs or something.
Yeah,
like that.
right,
I think
right.
That was the context for the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's always like the meme angle.
I mean, I recognize how silly it sounds for somebody like myself to say the context doesn't matter for this particular case, but it really, like, whatever the case may be, I was just curious if it was an esports party or not, because if it was, I don't know how he made it through. Like, how did nobody else?
Yeah, right.
Like,
that's so true. I feel like they're definitely just at a club. You know what I mean? They've just gone out as a group, get the VIP section, and there's enough money involved that obviously that kind of club, it's just not going to be bothered.
And obviously the Tater himself is like, hey man, I'm also a VIP, and the people at the club are like, are you sure? Like, what where's all your money or whatever? And he's like, well, I got loads of property.
True. Yeah, it's all tied up.
Have you seen my cars?
No one's gonna want to buy it because my brand's associated, and it's like, it's a bit tough to sell when it's like based on your brand. But yeah, I don't know. As well, the thing is, it's like, we don't really know what's happened like while they're there, as any of the players or staff that are involved, or maybe indeed Carlos has kind of handpicked like people that he thinks won't really get involved while it's there or whatever.
It's like, we must speculate in the absence.
Well,
of
yeah,
information,
indeed.
you know what I mean?
But to be fair, if I were there, and I don't like the guy, you know, I'll pull it out on the stream and probably but he calls himself Top G. I just think he's, you know, top cunt, to be honest. Both in terms of views and just the way he carries himself through life and the way he talks to people and all that sort of shit. But yeah, I would be a bit in shock. I'd be a bit like, how has this crossover happened? You know,
Yeah.
It would be absolutely unbelievable to just see with your own eyeballs. But moving on. More specifically,
there's a question, Script.
Yeah, okay,
There's a
okay,
question.
go ahead,
Would
go
you
ahead.
do something about it though, or would you just be like, all right, I'm not fucking touching this? Like, do you stay in the club? Do you go to the other side? What do you think? Like, I mean, you don't have to say something definitive. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean,
like, that's the thing is right. There's the question is asked of like how could Carlos do this? But,
Yeah, right.
I mean, we don't know. I still don't know, and maybe we do know as collectively, but I don't know whether Carlos was the one who invited him, who got him situated, or was he like, did he
Already there?
Who
Was he already there?
Yeah.
Was he already in the club? Like, did it just happen? Was it like this is a chance event? I could imagine Carlos doing is like, oh shit, there's a tater over there. I'm gonna take a selfie or whatever. Like that, I could imagine Carlos doing that just because it would be funny. And then like later on, he called him his friend or whatever, or said, "You're not gonna police my friends," which we'll get to it, I guess. But it's like, mate, like I don't know if he's your friend.
Read the room, bro. Read the room as well.
If he was, don't say that one. Don't use that line. But yeah, so like, but what would people's reactions be exactly? Because I would probably just walk away because I don't know the guy very much. I would just be like, all right, well, I'm gonna go to this side of the club with the people that I know or whatever. You know, like,
no, I think that's probably where
gathering
I'd be
crowd.
at. I'm definitely secure enough in myself to say that, look, I wouldn't. He is also like a world championship kickboxer, so you definitely wouldn't want to start some kind of confrontation. But yeah, I'd just be like, I have got no idea. That is just surreal. So I'm just off.
Yeah.
You know.
The only things I'll add to this are just like, yeah, the context of how he's even there in the first place doesn't make any like. How does he get involved? He could have just been walking past, and someone's like, "Oh, you know, just come in, have one drink, and then you know, fuck off." Basically, like,
Yeah, who knows?
Because while people will refuse to admit it and maybe don't like to admit it, you know, this guy actually had a big platform, a big like audience, and you have to have a certain level of charisma to pull people to your ideas or to your attention, whether or not that's good ideas or not, because there are certainly bad ones. The guy has a certain level of character to him that, you know, makes people listen, right? So even if you hate all of his views and everything, I could certainly see the angle where Carlos is like, oh yeah, you know, that guy, he is probably quite funny, or he has a bit of character, like as a person head to head. Even if I object with his ideas, like, you know, we could get on and we maybe could just sit down for a drink. And I don't think it's anything more than that. But because he's recorded this video, knowing full well that he's framed these two people at the center of the attention. Like, it's done very intentionally that way. It's like, oh my god, can you believe who's here? It's these guys. And look, we're getting drinks ready. Like, Carlos had to have known that was a bad idea. But it is kind of crazy to see how everything is just landslid from there so rapidly afterwards. Like, he's not saying he agrees with his point of view. He's just... Again, it could be happenstance. He could have been in the club already, for all we know. Like, and people were crowding around him, thinking, like, "Is that the real Baldy and his brother? I can't believe it. What a surprise!" You know, like, there's so much surrounding about it that is just like not talked about, and maybe it has been talked about on the G2 boards. Maybe that's why things have landslid. But it's just so like, it's crazy how quick this has all moved. In my opinion, it's kind of absurd.
Yeah, I definitely do get that. I will say, just to be more on the side of what indeed has happened in the reaction, I think that, you know, unfortunately there was a period of time where it was difficult to not really know what was going on, and it was a little bit sort of car crashy. You don't want to look, but you can't look away, you know, or whatever. So unfortunately I have a little more like context than I'd like about this guy, but as far as I'm aware, I think he's pretty reluctant to leave Romania. So, you know, I feel like we are maybe benefit the doubting, and there's not fully, but playing on different options. I'll kind of put my foot down a little bit and say I don't think that a happenstance meeting was really on the cards. I think that, you know, they're out. We've got a bit of basis in London. Carlos is Spanish. Don't know. LEC takes place, so it's maybe Germany, right? Because like that's where the players would be. You'd think, at least at that time. So anyway, I feel like there's been a bit of, you know what would be a cool idea, and Carlos has a bit of the pull or whatever to maybe, but also here's another line. I don't know why, maybe not too much devil's advocating, but how do you get in contact with this guy? Because he got banned off everything. So like,
is he on email? What is it?
well, I would imagine there is a way, but what I'm saying is you probably need to know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows him, So that's another angle that I think Carlos probably indeed did go to a few lengths and was like,
they might have planned like video content with Andrew Tate. Like,
maybe right when he was at the height of,
yeah. I don't think that would be totally out of G2 character to pull like a controversial person, make them do something fucking stupid or like silly for a skit. And then shovel it off somewhere.
Get Nico in a Bugatti, mate.
Could have been something.
I don't know.
It could be
put him
something
in like
that,
he can be like a trial coach or something. I could see it anyway. Is what I'm saying. Is I could see there he'd be like,
yeah, we finally got a coach that Nico will listen to, or whatever.
Dude, imagine if that type of thing did come out. What kind of rabbit hole?
Oh my god,
we'd be pulling out the weeds with G2.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. It would be over. That would just the total collapse of the org if he was ever going to be like that.
That would be mental.
Yeah.
And listen, we might actually be looking at the total collapse of the org anyway. Maybe not financially or whatever. They did lose out on the Valorant sponsor or the Valorant inclusion, and that is obviously valued at some amount of money that people are not really agreeing upon yet. But it's in the probably double-digit millions of dollars, so like low tens or something. That's what the general agreed upon idea is, and. Say what you will about Valorant, there's a potential for this to really backfire or whatever. And so I'm interested in seeing how that happens or how that shapes up, because if the general feeling is that Carlos built up G2 himself, obviously had help in terms of the rest of the people that were there, but as a result of his particular persona and the way that he carried himself, to your point, Yumi, about like how obviously these people have charisma, even if you don't necessarily like their ideas. Well, Carlos just obviously was a character that you like to see. You like to see what he would do on Twitter. If you were just passing the time or like you saw a G2 post, you could imagine that Carlos had like a quote tweet or a reply or something that was going to be pretty funny. And then obviously he would say, there was the way that he announced Monacy, which I thought was a bit like whatever, but like apparently that was funny for people. He was like, "Fine, welcome Monacy" or whatever. He's like angry that people kept yelling at him to announce him. Like he's a face of the brand, obviously. He's a face of the org. And without him, they don't have anybody who's even really close to that, in my estimation, who could come close to carrying the overall like image of the organization. And that's probably the biggest loss here for that organization in particular, is that they do just kind of feel like they don't have anybody waiting in the wings to take up that side effect. You know what I mean? Like
no understudy.
Yeah, there's not been anybody who has been the apprentice to the master, so to speak. And I think Carlos was really a master at like carrying the brand in that sense. And because of that, somebody's going to have to take up the slack and learn quick. I don't know if it's going to be the next CEO, because that's like a really weird union, actually, when you really think about it. It's like we don't really have that many people who are running all of the day-to-day aspects of the company and also running the social media, basically. It's like that's a weird combo. It's like both of those are full-time positions. So really, the CEOs are usually more than full-time, if we're honest, too. So the idea that he's able to do both of those things, and he's also able to like appear on talk shows or interviews or whatever and like give a lot of interesting answers and like draw a crowd and stuff, that's something that G2 are now really lacking for. I don't really know if they have anybody else who would be as public-facing for as many different departments, like who could represent G2 in every game that they run or every aspect of the company. I don't think there's really anybody like that. So, and there's not really that many people like that in any aspect of any sports organization. So, yeah, I would say on that sense, I'm quite sad to see him go, and I think G2 will also. They're probably also quite sad to see him go, especially since they also waved goodbye to that Valorant thing. So
it's just like having a main CEO or somebody that people can connect to on some level. Someone that's endemic to esports is important. Like you look at Cloud9 with Jack Etienne. You think about like Hex and Optic, right? I guess I can't say OG, Optic. You think about like Nade Shot, you think about Jason Lake. Like these are guys that have been like with those companies and have built them and have built a following almost around themselves alongside the company. So Carlos is another one of those people that I think was far more even like creatively tasked than any of those. But had the same sort of roots and rapport to him. So yeah, I think it's honestly it's a pretty big loss to the industry in that sense, and I don't know that G2 are ever going to really recover from that. OG, no tail, same kind of deal. Like people connect themselves to people that are endemic to the scene, and we might end up just having like somebody corporate take over for G2 because they might just go for a more company stance, try and actually look like a corporation instead of an esports org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you guys think that there is anybody who, like, you obviously rattled off a bunch of names there, Yumi, but I feel like for every single one of those names, I think like either the org is maybe too much of a smaller org or like has less of a presence or something, or they're just really focused on one esport. Like somehow Carlos managed to like draw attention to the CSGO side and the League side, which is where he's endemic. And I think like his Rocket League detachment or whatever, like all of the other ones that maybe we don't know about as much, like because of the fact that those were smaller games, they naturally had more attention to give to a CEO in that sense anyway. But it's like when we're so overwhelmed with things to pay attention to in CS, you wouldn't expect somebody more endemic to League to also be able to like capture our attention as well. And that's really what I think gets me. And, I think for, No Tail's obviously more on the Dota side. You think about like even the people over in Liquid, it's like they had two different main people in that sense, right? It was like Nazgul and Joka Steve and stuff. And like Joka Steve was more on the League side, and Nazgul was more on like the Dota and CS side. But even then, it's like you don't really think of them. Like you can't. My point is that like even if you can think of a particular person from a CS angle, like Jason Lake, obviously for complexity, I don't know if you can think about that for their other esports adventures. Like I don't think if you think about an organization, you think of a particular person. I think really Carlos was like the last or one of the last people that really comes to mind for any esport that you follow this team in. You know what I mean? And without that unifying factor, I do wonder what they're going to do. Like if they're going to be able to maintain their popularity in that sense, or their like outreach in general.
Yeah, I think Carlos just kind of transcends an awful lot of the other things that tie back other names that you mentioned. There's only a few of them. You know what I mean? Like Shox is maybe where it's like you're not a CSGO pundit or whatever, and it's like maybe we'll know about it because we pay attention to a few different ones. More hardcore fans are like, I watch CS, I tune into a bit of League, Valorant's my favorite, or whatever. May well know about these names, but Carlos is
God
someone...
help you if you ever say that last one.
But you know what I mean? Like Carlos is bigger than the game. Like Carlos is in and a big part and a big name in the esports industry. Yes, and there's a few others. You can maybe Shox is perhaps someone. Monty maybe. Thorin, Richard. Semler perhaps because he did a bit of Overwatch. Anders and Semler kind of thing. Maybe you've got people who have been around for like quite a while, people who have influence, people who have had impact, and I feel like Carlos, fills all of those criteria. So yeah, it is a damn shame, to be honest. And the thing is, as a bit more information is coming out, I feel like we have a bit of G2 decision making, but also I think it's a lot more actually Riot have tied the hands because
the franchise
literally maybe like an hour ago though, Lewis Mira has tweeted out, got an article coming, I guess, that they've blacklisted him and they're forcing him to also sell his shares in G2. So it's not just a Valorant franchising decision now. It's now,
also the League side.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they are completely cutting ties, which to me feels like G2 may well have punished and reprimanded him and been like, for goodness sake, this is one of your biggest PR storms, and may well be something that we can't quite recover from. And then they're like, take some time off, or we're gonna put a statement out separate to you, and you're also expected to apologize and grovel and everything. And then the phone rings and it's the big red phone that only one person has the number to, and it's like, yeah, you're not getting that franchise spot, mate. And to be fair,
not only that,
get rid of him.
It's get rid of him. So getting rid of him as CEO. Well, I wouldn't put it past Riot. The problem is getting rid of him as CEO when he still has a controlling stake or whatever doesn't actually matter that much. Like it does matter for us and the public, But for the industry side, he
True.
would actually still be involved in G2 in that sense. He would still, like, if he is controlling shares or whatever, if he has like a certain amount of shares that make it so that he can still be a decision maker or have some sort of agency, he would still be able to affect change in the company. And we obviously know that he's very passionate about the project. So the idea that he would just give that up is pretty far-fetched, unless maybe the leverage here is G2 will be removed from League of Legends
That
if
would
they
probably be
can't,
it.
if they can't be removed. Obviously, that's his home game, right? So that would be that's a very interesting decision that he has to make there, because, and also I think a pretty fucked up one. I mean, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
like, I don't know if it makes sense to say, hey, this game that you built your, like, most of your legacy from, all of your legacy as a player, and then a huge amount of your legacy as a team organization owner or whatever. Yeah, you're blacklisted from that, and any game that we make aside from that.
But
Is
it's not the type of attention
extreme.
that not the type of attention that Riot would want to their game. You know,
Yeah.
Associating yourself with somebody that is very misogynistic views when the company that you are has also undergone some investigations for.
Oh yeah, let's just be real. Like, they've
the Monty
actually
tweet,
been
right.
discriminatory. Yeah.
Yeah, they
So-
they have unfortunately like a company background of something
Yeah.
very similar. So you know,
And-
having ties even vaguely to that, or not sort of reprimanding, or not, and having that brand associated with them would be damaging to Riot. And I think they are probably just recognizing that as well. Like, I'd imagine G2 were probably shoo-ins for the Valorant deal because of the fact they have the league connection, because of the fact they've been in the game from the start. To have that then pulled out from them and then probably leveraging, like you said, the league angle as well. Like, Riot do hold a lot of the G2 business, unfortunately, in their hands, and G2 have themselves to blame for that in some degree. And you have to, like, if you're gonna be a partner to these companies, your views have to align to a certain degree. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's also, you have to bear in mind, a bit of a shot in the foot for Riot themselves, right, in terms of that business aspect, because they were going to have G2 in the NA franchising, which is probably going to be the premier product for Valorant, at least to start with, right? Because I think that, you know, it's obviously the more popular game esports wise than CS, whereas CS is still king in Europe or whatever. Where I'm pretty sure that G2, and they still do, have had a European based team for their life cycle within. So, you know, is it as simple as you would lift the team? But they're getting an organization that's been more EU centric into North America, one of, if not the biggest esports brand in the industry. Definitely, I would say, kind of in Valorant. You maybe got a couple others like Sentinels or whatever that have got like the hottest team, or Optic, controversially not involved in there, like the hottest team right now or whatever. But certainly you do have to look from their point of view, where actually they're also missing out on a really big brand that has a lot of pulling power to their, like I say, I think NA is going to be that premier product once it gets kicked off, where they will, you know, kind of take some of the LEC philosophy and inject it over there and get them to be the big content house or whatever, you know, at least to begin with. So there is that kind of angle you do have to respect, and we don't know how these decisions are made. There's many people, you know, in the same way that Carlos doesn't speak for all of G2, as they made quite clear. The executives that have not lost their jobs maybe also indeed don't speak for the Valorant arm of Riot and whatnot, you know. So there is also that kind of angle, but
and none of them speak for the guy who farted in people's faces. So
right, exactly.
That's just how it is.
Yeah, but it definitely does. It's kind of it's a shame. In no way, and again, I feel like it's kind of a bit silly that maybe we have to keep reiterating, but don't condone what he did or then said, because I think the big problem is that he did
doubling
not.
down
Yeah,
and tripling and afterwards. Yeah, that's all.
If
bad.
he'd have
That's all
gone
bad as well.
If he'd have got, because look, again, as we have mentioned and as we've talked about, we don't have a lot of the context, so he could easily have, you know.
He could have just been like, I thought it was funny we were in the same
Yeah,
spot.
exactly.
Isn't that so quirky and zany?
Yeah. But I think that would at the very least have stopped some of the blowback of everyone being like, right, well, I guess you're starting to kind of double down on it and whatnot and defend your position, then maybe you do, to a certain degree, defend and agree with what that character represents.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
get a celebrity, even if it's a bad celebrity. Let's have a party because we're going wild and I want to get some likes on Twitter. versus actually he's kind of a cool guy. If you listen to what he's got to say, then maybe you'll kind of see where he's coming from. You know, is sort of the energy that some of those tweets had.
Clip that.
Yeah, totally out of context. Does not matter. But indeed, you do have to see where all these different like businesses and everything are coming from, because Carlos really did not help himself in this particular situation. Yeah. But again, it is that kind of scary encroaching, and we'll see what happens in our world of CS and everything with the PIF and whatnot. But Riot just kind of reminding that even if you are big, even if you are, you know, cool and popular or whatever, we are the god king of this space, and you can't
making money because we let you.
Right, exactly. And this is one show, and a bigger one, a more you know, profile behind it and everything, and a lot harder. But it also, you can go back kind of 6 months, and Sean and DDK had a, you know, not too dissimilar kind of treatment of, like, at least in the core principle of, we don't really like where they're going, so we're gonna softly, this is a much harder cut, obviously, but they kind of, you know, softly started removing them from broadcast and forced them to do something else. And yeah, well, I don't think that they understood. It's like, you know, that's kind of the, Sean and DDK were like, well, I guess this is how it is, and we'll find a different avenue, and it might not be the exact thing that we want to do, but, you know, still getting paid relatively well, still involved in a game that we're enjoying. Whereas the Carlos side, he didn't really get it, you know?
Also, the funniest thing is the only game he's not blacklisted from that's tier 1 now is probably CS. I guess Dota as well. But it's like, yeah, we might be seeing more of him in the future is all I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because that is another, like, what happens now, like, for G2. Again, hands are kind of tied, but does Carlos go back and he's like, G3? And everyone just, you know, moves across, and because the whack thing is that there was, you know, a fair bit of support as well. I think is one thing that really sort of upset people, is that, again, you know, you're giving a platform to you know, the guy, but also kind of giving a platform to his supporters as well. When you're like,
it's a bit of a lightning rod, I guess.
Who I want, when it, Carlos is one of us guys, so we're gonna come out in droves and support him, you know, and all that. So yeah, it
is just kind of wild to think that, like, this guy doesn't upload this video, this never happened. You know?
This guy, doesn't make any more tweets if he's too busy just fucking drinking with the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like, he could have been at his house. Could have been at his house every day. People could have known about it. Nope, probably nobody would have probably said a thing. You know.
Well, yeah, that's the point I was making earlier.
Yeah, it's all just out there in the public. So unfortunately, the public are gonna raise their pitchforks. Like, that is.
Well, yeah,
that is how it works. Like, if they don't align with the views and they think that you are trying to platform them, then.
That's kind of the area that, you know, the sort of the paragons that come out, like a Thorin and a Richard and a Monty and whatnot, that have obviously stood by that kind of thing, that will then criticize, well, you know, with one hand you say this, and with the other hand you'll go off and happily watch certain products or whatever, or support other people in the, you know, just because, indeed, like you say, the pitchfork's kind of out. And I feel like the three of us are in a position where you see, I don't want to speak for you two, right, but you see where some of the logic is, some of the injustice is. It's kind of the way, you know, ultimately in our fucking core tenets of free speech and all that, and enterprise and whatever, that Riot can do what they want, so long as it's within the confines of the law. But it is a little bit like there's a lot of different sides, and I think that we're in a bit of a world of extremes. Not to take it to, you know, a deep philosophical, that's the word. There you go.
There you go.
I think where I would end this is that, like, it's damaging for G2 to lose Carlos, but it was probably, but because of what we discussed here, like, it's probably more damaging to them that they lose both their franchise league spots. You know, like, it was the lesser of the two evils for G2 as a brand to do it this way, instead of, like, reprimanding him, making him sell maybe even, like, the majority of his shares, keeping him still involved in the company, because he actually does have a pretty big influence on the company and, like, actually has a good following. Like they could have done that, but
Mm-hmm.
if they're being handed this notice by Riot, then they're pushed that extra step.
And by the way, I would like to know, like on Scrib's other point, where is the energy? Where is this energy about Carlos and who he parties with and blah blah blah? When we are dealing with like Saudi investment fund and all this other shit, like where were you guys? We needed you maybe like months ago, maybe like years ago when like the whole Flashpoint shit was going down. Like maybe there could have been some more good things that happened. Maybe this isn't the if you think that Carlos being ejected from the scene is a good thing because of your energy on Twitter, then surely we could have done many more better things even if you had decided to speak up a little bit sooner. So that's probably the biggest pet peeve I have with this whole situation is like what Scrib said is just the duality. It's like, how dare you party with this guy? Meanwhile, fuck those refugees. Am I right? That's the energy. You can clip that too. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's always these types of situations are always very. They feel like they're a bit silly, you know. For me, although it's a big part of like work and all that sort of stuff, I think it is just the great big reset button on social media and all that kind of stuff, and just the effect that that's kind of had on you know, just the hive mind and yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it definitely is, and there were a good number of stories that came out about Carlos and how he'd been very open and he set up and this is the issue. It's like he's probably I don't know him that well, but at all. But from the read and from the type of character that he's been on social medias and stuff, he probably just thinks the whole thing was fucking hilarious. Imagine the scenes, guys, you know, and then when he's like, I party with whoever, he's not like, I party with whoever I want, you know, that's not the tone of it. He's like, I do what I want, mate. I love partying and, you know, whatever. No one's gonna police
then
my
the party
friends.
stopped
And then
somehow.
yeah, and then it's like at the next party he's got like fucking a random you know, Snoop Dogg. It's like now he's in esports, isn't he? He's part of Faze or whatever. You know, it's like, yo, look at this, look at this party animal.
Nobody polices my friendship.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but yeah, and it's wild, isn't it? Because that's another thing. It's like he could have been in a country maybe you know where drugs aren't legal, but if he gets Snoop Dogg involved, people wouldn't be bothered about that. People would not give a shit that he's breaking the law and posting it on social media. But you know whatever. We could talk forever about the mechanics of all this. It was silly. He should be smarter. He should most definitely be smarter to know. This is not going down so well, so I gotta
He should have
pull
cut
out.
his losses.
Yeah, exactly, and be like,
Carlos giveth and Carlos taketh away.
Look,
so,
man,
you know what I'm saying?
the amount of apology videos that, like, you know, you remember when Logan Paul went into the goddamn forest and filmed all, like, you know what I mean? Like, and this guy's still around, and now I know people who years ago would have been like, oh yeah, fuck that guy, because everyone was like, fuck that guy, and now they're like, actually, I think the I'm Paulson podcast is really funny. And it's like, you know, where are we at? Like, it's all this kind of. So if he'd just come out,
I'd pay for every one of his matches.
But you know, it's like if he'd come out and he had indeed put his business hat on and been like, all right, this is maybe not the. But at the same time, it is a bit of an unprecedented situation. For within like 48 hours, he's just gone. You know. And now as it extends maybe to more like a week or whatever, if that, I don't even know. Like I can't even remember. It's all been, but you know, the
by the way,
Riot are just like see you in a bit completely.
Yeah.
Not even like G2 franchising. Maybe next time. You know, we'll let this blow. They're actually like goodbye. You know.
See ya.
So.
But think about that, the optics of that as well, because everybody's like part of the angle was that like, hey, he's been like, if you're going to cost a company tens of millions of dollars, like most people would be fired. And you know, I agree with that stance. I think primarily, maybe not if you're the CEO, maybe not, but I don't think this was even G2's choice. Like,
that's kind of what we're
Riot
figuring.
are being heavy-handed here. That's not even G2's choice. So what does that say about the brand? Like, is this only because Riot said something? Like
I think, yeah,
that's a whole other angle that people need to think about. I think.
And
if
who-
they're
who
gonna
knows?
make
Onto
G2
something.
futures.
as well.
yeah,
I
you might
feel
be
like
onto something there.
again, Riot are maybe worried about, like, you know, because Riot have got a couple titles and apparently we've got some other ones coming as well, and they're looking for a whole sort of takeover angle and whatnot, you know, having multiple esports and G2, as we've said, Carlos as well, but G2 as an are starting to transcend the bubble of League of Legends. Eventually, you never know, in years to come, G2 might go, you know what, we're pulling out of League of Legends, actually, you know, for some big spin, or we're gonna, you know, get rid of our EU team where there's like Rogue, and I don't watch League all that much. Is Vitality in? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't even know who's in the LEC. I could not name you all, like, fucking 12 teams or whatever it is. But G2 could go, well, we're done with the LEC now, but Riot, we want to get a Korean team, actually, to grow our... And then the whole, like, public backlash of, you know, this is all just conjecture, but G2 starting to maybe have way more pulling power and influence than Riot would want.
You're saying
So
they might be nipping
here
them
we
in the
are.
bud
It's
as
like,
they're going.
aha, we've got an opportunity to shut them down, you know, and
it could be that.
put them in their place, and get rid of the kind of, get a businessman in, get a snake in a suit to run the company that'll agree with us, and if we, you know, show them some green, they'll be happy and whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than Carlos, who's like, I want esports to succeed in the way I want it to, and, you know, this is my company from the original days and all that kind of a lot more passion, a lot more, you know, the money is one thing, but I care more about the company itself. They want someone to kind of come in and just listen to them and yeah, just kind of share the money out.
In some ways, Carlos is esports. Did you know?
Well, there you go. He's one of the many faces on Mount Rushmore for sure.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is that. So to Yumi's point about like them maybe be having their hands tied, the thing that always confused me when they decided he was going to be stepping down as CEO, before I realized that like all of this stuff about him being blacklisted, obviously, is that if G2 lost millions of dollars because of this move, what is their proposed way to get those millions of dollars back if they don't have the core face of their brand that has given them so much money to begin with? It's like... that would be like if I had this, like, I don't even know what the analogy is. I have this golden chicken, but it just like shat all over my yard or something. And I have to spend millions of dollars cleaning my yard. But the golden chicken lays golden eggs and I can sell those for money. Now I'm killing that chicken. It's like, what the fuck? Like, what? Yeah. Where is the, like, you're really cutting off your nose to spite your face here, is what it felt like to me. But now that we have shade in the extra detail of like that golden chicken's getting ousted, blacklisted or whatever, that's a bit different. So.
I don't know. I feel like the two angles are either it's just panic stations and it's like the whole thing could go up in flames if we don't, or maybe there's some kind of, look, here's what we're going to do about this as Riot, and if you play along and don't stand by your guy and, you know, get rid of him and all that, then in the next round of franchising for Valorant, you'll be involved, and that's how you'll get your money back, you know. So I feel like that's got to be the two angles for G2.
Well,
it probably is the former, that it's like shit has hit the fan, damage control.
I guess,
know?
It could be.
I mean, just think about it from this angle. Tiger Woods, Nike sponsorship, he lost that at one point, didn't he? But they sponsor him now. All it takes is time sometimes.
Well, they didn't want him
to forget. People do.
They obviously didn't want Tiger to start, maybe cheating on them with another sports brand. So
I'd have been.
Couldn't afford that.
Yeah. But, you know,
shall we ask? I have to ask the question, of course, to bring it back to CS. Is that will G2's lineup? Do you guys think will they perform any differently given the circumstances? Are they able to actually tune this out? Because if I'm on the team and my CEO is just partied with a tater tot, and now I'm getting fucked like nonstop, like worrying about the existential fate of my organization almost. And like, there's all this stuff about in the news about how he's blacklisted from league and they have no money and what's going on. They lost his spot. Do I care about that? Can I just focus? What do you think?
I don't think they care.
Yeah, I don't think they care too much.
Yeah.
I feel like that lineup is competitively driven. They want to win. They want to be a top 3 team this year.
They're getting paid a pretty penny though, so that's the thing. Is like,
can they?
They might be worried about can they continue to.
But who on that team? If you know, we'll this is our CS segue, right? Who on that team really cares about money? You know, it does help,
all
right?
of them
but like,
a little
no,
bit,
but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It's like it does to live, sure, somewhere to take your girlfriend out and like be cool and sleep and yeah, sure, like the basic amenities. But what I'm saying is like, I don't know that I'm not going to play for your team unless you pay me 35k a month or whatever is necessarily. I feel like the vast majority of them in there, you've got a few out where Money's a bit young, Money's no object, he's just loving life or whatever.
Literally in his name, bro. That's how much he cares about.
True, I suppose. But like Hunter and Nico, they want the major, Huxley's just happy to be here.
It does feel that way.
I gotta get it in. Bless him. Prove us wrong, Huxley man. Prove us wrong. But
he's on the right track.
He is. He's looking okay.
He will be the most affected player, though. He won't have Carlos in the background going, Giga Chad Huxley! So,
true,
he won't be putting posters around.
That's going to be Carlos's last legacy, though, is the,
Right before he carries his box out, he's like cleaned out his office, and just on the top there is
the final frame.
Last thing.
The final frame picture of Giga Chad Huxley, and he's like, Huxley, I want you to have this. So a little something. I'll sign it for you.
Something to remember me by.
Yeah.
What's that second signature, boss? Oh, don't worry about it. Just don't take any photos with it. You'll be fine.
Yeah. But no, I don't think they'll be too bothered. There is a little bit of like, oh, what happens, money, but these guys are all, if they can prove their tenure here towards the end of the year, they'll get picked up by someone else. Mm-hmm. Maybe picked apart, which would be sad, but I don't know that. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of time to run some damage control at G2. I don't think that the ground is going to fall out from under them and they've got to start selling teams. However, if they do, the CS team is definitely the first one to go because they're super expensive. So, and
maybe not a lot of return either.
Yeah,
right.
Right. So, to make
that's the thing is like
is maybe the better word.
We were just out, and I'm pulling us back in, but very briefly, it does seem like Carlos's main ethos was like, I want to win in every game, basically. I don't know if that's going to be G2's new ethos, right? And so if they are thinking of downsizing or whatever, it could be a very possible angle for the CS team, because this team was built as a loss leader, presumably, or at least a loss, and it's just one of those things where it's like, there's no way, even with all the content they do and all the winning that they've started to do, there's no way they're making, anywhere close to even on this or anywhere close to profit. So, yeah, just looking at that roster, I don't know, it'll be interesting. Hopefully they stick together long enough for our hypotheses to be proven true or false about this Huxley IGL and like all the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, they don't play for a little while here because the playoffs, they're in the second round, thanks to them going 5-0. So we'll have to wait to see whether or not they've been affected by all the news.
Indeed. All right. I reckon time to solidly move on then and get into the playoffs. I mean, I don't want to rehash. We talked about some of the groups already. Let's have a brief little chat about where Group D ended up. For me, I expected maybe Liquid to do a little bit better. To be honest, EG, they won some games. That's cool. But to be honest, in terms of who qualified and who didn't, I'm not really all that surprised by this one. Cloud9 looked... it's kind of I expected a flip of Cloud9 and Liquid, to be honest. Maybe I'm, a little bit too much on the Yekindar hype train. Which is a question, actually, guys. Where are we at? Yekindar or Yekindar?
Oh, every time I hear Yekindar, I feel like it's like somebody's about to
like
throw
a gag
up,
reflex
so.
almost.
Yeah.
Yak.
Yak, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say Yekindar.
No hate to Moses. He was on last time, but still, come on, bro. He said Yekindar a few times. I don't know if it was accidental or not, and it was like silk. It was smooth. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, I guess that is like the third, isn't it? There's Yekindar. I say with like the Yekindar.
Oh, I see.
And then Yekinder. Yeah. So there's a few different ones.
Like Kinder Bueno.
Yeah. Kinder eggs.
That might just be the accent difference, like coming in on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Kinder.
Yeah. It does sound a bit weird.
Where are my Texas casters at?
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I feel like they're a little bit flipped, them and Cloud9, but ultimately no massive surprises.
I predicted Cloud9 to have a slower start, more or less. I was thinking that like before this, I wasn't sure where to put Furia. They end up exiting in second, which is cool. They obviously looked a bit better. I mean, it's not the greatest field to test themselves against in this particular case. I will say Eternal Fire looked kind of surprising in terms of just how everything shaped up there. Obviously, taking one of Liquid's matches there. So that was a surprise to me. I was not expecting that. And then obviously at the very end, Liquid defeating Cloud9. That got a little dicey. I was not sure if they would make it through because if they did lose an OT on the second map, almost surely you start thinking Liquid choke. Like what's going on here? So that was a little scary. But no, they managed to squeak into playoffs, and it's a 2-0. It looks good on the books. People will be like, oh yeah, it was great. But if you actually watch the game, it's a bit closer than that. So yeah, surprising. I don't know how this format is just really, really weird because whenever you look at a round robin and it's like one team's already in playoffs no matter what. I don't even know if Cloud9 were theoretically playing for seeding versus Furia in this case. Like, I don't even think that would have affected them. I think they were guaranteed top. So, like, what did they have to play for exactly? And that's going to be an intangible thing. A lot of people think, like, when they first hear about round robins and, like, what do you mean they have to play because it's their job? Are you saying that they're secretly not going to be, like, trying? Are you saying that, like, is it an indictment of the players? No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, subconsciously, when you know this game is basically meaningless for your outcome in the group or whatever,
your brain
you don't really know, like,
work the same way.
Yeah. If all you're really playing for is like HLTV rating or like ranking points or something for getting the win, I mean that can be important. We talked in the show before about how that's like commensurate to bonuses. If you get stay within the top 5, you activate like a contract bonus probably or whatever. But like, that's a little bit different than like the prestige of being in the top of the group, which you already achieved. The prestige of like it being a match that matters in terms of like going ahead. Like this is an elimination game. Like that's gonna put you in a completely different mindset. You can't really like, as stoic as you want to be, you can't really like remove yourself from that and still say I'm going to play my best CS. Your brain doesn't work that way, like Yumi said. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Liquid was allowed to 2-0 and squeak by, but. I don't know. It's an impossible counterfactual.
It's what Yakindar even says in his interview afterwards. He says like, I mean, they didn't know that they had to win that match. I think even if Cloud9 won one map, then Eternal Fire would have overtaken Liquid.
Oh yes, because of the way that the Eternal Fire series worked.
I think Cloud9. I had the document because I was on for the concurrent streams. I think Cloud9 had to win. Eternal Fire did their part. They won 2-0.
Okay.
But if Cloud9 oh god, if Cloud9 won 2-0 and Furia won 2-0, then Eternal Fire could win 2-1. If Cloud9 won and Furia had to win 2-0 in each situation,
and they did,
and Eternal Fire won, then Eternal Fire would have to win 2-0. So Eternal Fire did their part, but Cloud9 didn't do theirs, let's say.
Yeah.
But yeah, effectively Liquid had to win this best of 3, and they did. Good for them. But they didn't know that they had to win effectively to do it because they didn't know the outcomes of the other games. And so he was saying afterwards, it's like, even if that was the case, like Cloud9 aren't going to be psychologically ready or like able to put their best foot forward. Like you find yourself in the toughest bind. It's complex situations that require creative solutions, and Cloud9 aren't back against the wall. They're not trying to get out of the groups. They know that they've already secured their spot. They're not going to come up with the most creative solutions. They'll stick with what they know. They'll try and make things work. They'll try to win. I don't doubt that in my mind. I think there's like a 5k bonus for every win or something like that within the group stage. So there is some motivation to continue to perform, and you want that for your organization as well. But yeah, you're just not going to try as hard, and that's not because you're not trying. It like that's just how the human body functions in a lot of ways. Like, unless you're desperate, you're not going to do something that you otherwise wouldn't, or like make the play that could be defining of the whole game. So
yeah, it's a weird format. We could definitely talk about round robin for a while. And you have a group like this where it's exciting on that final day a little bit because there's so many different permutations, but also it's kind of confusing. I don't know how anybody keeps
track of it all.
Exactly. there's like a dedicated on the I did 2 concurrent days, right? And you get put in an email chain, and that gets updated sort of after every win with the changes in scenarios. And there's like dedicated people. There's got to be a team. There's like one person that communicates, and all the talent are in there, right? Because again, like while you're in the middle of doing it, there's no way you can just sort of check on HLTV on your phone like in between games and be like, all right, okay, so we got makes sense. It's like there's like a dedicated team to keeping track. So God only knows how the average viewer like feels going into these games that you may well convince yourself don't matter, but actually, technically, they do, but sort of kind of not, you know? Oh, they lost the first map, now it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah.
It's a really kind of weird way of going about it. And I think if it was like one where is it Group B, right, where FaZe were like maybe possibly not in if they didn't beat Big, that's kind of
that
like
happened.
You know, that's kind of because they lost to Outsiders, right? So it's like, that's a little on edge. Top team in the world right now, number one, maybe. Are they? They didn't top the group, and they might go out, you know. So that does raise like a few of these sort of conversations in a group like that, where you get a really specific, you got a team that blows everyone out, you got a team that doesn't really do anything, and then you got a few in the middle that have got some, you know, upset potential maybe, and actually one of the upsets did happen, and it was like on the second day rather than on the second to last day, which now makes it really, you know. So I don't know. I'm not really with it. At the same time, I think we've talked about this many times, you and I, Pronogo, on the different shows that we talked about pro leagues and stuff.
I think I was on one of them as well. Like,
yeah.
Like group stages.
We were talking about Blast. Yeah, we were talking about like, what is it even there for? Why is it like this?
Yeah.
The other, like, the thing that gets me is really the fact that there's no reseeding. Apparently, there's no reseeding after the groups, because realistically speaking, like, you probably should do that just because you can get the teams to rank themselves, I guess, or whatever, like ahead of time, and maybe just keep using the same seeding that you already have.
Player break as well.
Yeah, it's just wild to me that, like, okay, Faze going up against Complexity looks like it's been seeded, but then you have Fnatic against Liquid. You have like I don't get that. That looks like Liquid got an easier time with their matchup for placing third. You know what I mean? Like, really, as far as I understand, the group draw or the playoff draw, bracket draw was like, here's a bunch of pool 2 teams, and here's a bunch of like exactly like Worlds or whatever. It's like, here's, you know, the people who finished third and the people who finished second, and we're going to put the people who finished third against people who finished second, no matter what. No context, doesn't matter. And so FaZe is treated the same as Fnatic, who both of them finished second in their group. They're not the same caliber of team at all.
And there's
but
easier groups.
You could Complexity could have just as easily gone against FaZe and they did, as they could have gone against Fnatic. And like, where does that make any sense? You know what I mean? So that's probably like the main thing, is that, like, if you're going to tell me that Furia and Fnatic and Faze, which are triple threat over here, as well as Heroic, are all going to be like the same caliber of team, like, that's weird. Then there's, of course, the Navi angle, where they're third, by the way, when they might be the second best team in the world, although they haven't really looked at this event. But like, that's a wild one. They only squeaked in. They have like a losing record, and they only squeaked in because of some like round differential or map differential rules or something.
Because
that's like the least
so close.
the least satisfying way to qualify a team in. You know what I mean? So, like, there's already that hanging over them. Then on top of it, it's like, you're Heroic, you finish second, your reward is facing Simple. Okay, man. Like,
it is kind of wild. But they also spent like 25 minutes explaining it on the broadcast after the playoffs or like the last group stage games had been concluded. Like, they did the draw live. They explained the process. They had the
yes, YouM3, but I didn't watch that, and I am an entitled viewer, and I want everything for free. So.
I mean, it was on the broadcast for free.
No, it wasn't downloaded into my brain for free like a Striker tweet. You know,
it is It was very like, they themselves, I think, will recognize that it's a bit convoluted. They walk through the process with you to be like, this is the method we're doing it in, so this is why things are going to be the way they are. You know, like that.
How did you guys like the draw then? Like, was it actually? Did they make it like an entertaining little like, oh, who do we have next or whatever? Was there a little bit of pomp?
Okay, first off, it wasn't very entertaining. It wasn't very well rehearsed. I don't think either.
Okay.
Like,
it needs a show.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it could be interesting. Like, Worlds has it like that.
Yeah, it could have been.
They do it in football. They do it in football like all the time. For like,
well, just imagine if you actually had the like the same way they had Complexity's reaction to their game. Like, they were watching a game that needed to go a certain way for them to qualify to playoffs, and it did, and then they were exciting. Like, imagine if you had that for every team. You could get every team's reactions like as part of the show when their stuff is pulled, and like you get to have like, I don't know, like that could be interesting.
You could like build suspense and you know, try and make it a whole thing, and they could have made it into a proper show. But
get one of the players that's been knocked out or whatever. you know,
Yeah,
or get
yeah.
right, or something. You make a bit of a show of it. Like I said, that's
But-
what they do in football, and it would be
Yeah,
a
but they
lot
got
more
the
entertaining.
they got a TO or like a tournament manager to go on and like try and explain things. They had Heku like being there to try and help make sense of it, but Heku's also kind of a little confused, like walking through it with him. And then they brought the commissioner on who just come off of a flight to be like, oh yeah, well the draw's gonna be super interesting. Glad EPL's been running well. And that was kind of
Has
it,
it?
you know. Like it's just kind of like that's the show. Like they
Yeah,
didn't there
okay.
was there's no suspense, there's no build up, there's not really much of anything afterwards. Like the fact that they pull an explanation out after, okay, first off, Freya does a video for them that explains the whole format, and then they do the live draw and then explain the whole format. So the Freya video is a little redundant, isn't it? It's like the same thing just rehashed in the same with
Maybe they had
actual
nothing else to
teams.
say. Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, there were certain things that like I appreciate that they did it, because
Yeah.
otherwise I wouldn't have
Sure.
understood how the fuck they drew anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was clearly probably thought of kind of on the fly, I think, from the way it looked.
Yeah, I mean that's one angle, right? And it's more money to get people in for another day to like, because the idea that
Yeah.
I would have would be like you sort of piggyback where it's like do a bit of a playoffs preview show afterwards, you know, or whatever.
Sure,
and it's
yeah.
like, right, well, this
Like
is the field.
how does this change it?
Yeah,
how does
like
this change
what-
our expectations?
what's going
You can
on
even do it
and-
before and after. That's why if it's like a whole day or like
True.
a segment or something, it's like, all right, guys, here are the teams that are in playoff contention, and like, what do we think about all of them? And then like organize them based on the seeding or whatever, and then like have everybody give their takes, and then the show happens, and then that takes like, I don't know, 30 minutes or however long it takes, and then afterwards you have like another, I don't know, 30-minute breakdown, hour-long breakdown, like podcast almost type thing, where everybody's in the room and stuff, and they're all talking. That could be really interesting. That would be like not really even shoulder content, like first-party broadcast content that would serve to like hype up the forthcoming playoffs. But that does seem like a little bit of an anomaly in esports if it happens at all. It's always like the analyst desk and so on and so forth is just like it. Maybe you'll get like a what is the I forget what the term is for the Flashpoint show. We referenced it
blind
before,
spot.
Blind
Yeah,
spot,
the
yeah.
blind
So the blind spot had the same idea where it's like after the games, we're gonna talk about like how things went. We're just gonna have a beer. We're gonna chill. There was obviously like I think Blast Premier had something like that, but
That little post show, yeah.
yeah, like something like that is where you'll usually see these extended things. You won't see a dedicated day just for broadcast talent to talk about things. That we haven't gotten to that level yet. But I do think there would be some like a lot of value add in that sense. And if you're talking about how much money you got, you know, like obviously apparently that stuff hasn't even cleared yet. But like, come on, bro, like give us a little something. This EPL overall has been. I really hope that this is like the end of the remote broadcast. I know it won't be, like factually, I know that, but I would like if I didn't have that information, I would speculate as a fan, hopefully pining for like live desks on site, everybody in the area, like give us like an event that doesn't still feel like we're in the COVID era. You know what I mean? Like that's probably the biggest complaint that I've had is that the casting is still wrong. Like people stopped complaining about it, but it's still like 0.05 or whatever milliseconds or seconds off. Like
we were so used to it during the COVID era. I think people have come to accept it. Like they're not complaining about the fact that casters are delayed for some of these online broadcasts.
Yeah,
It's
or
also-
well, it was the other way for me anyway. Is that like I would hear Satakist or somebody scream about a kill that's happening as he screams, or it's like the inverse of a delay where it's like the game is delayed.
Reaction time.
Yeah, his inhuman caster times. He's just like oh my god, and then when he says "my" is when the deagle shot hits. It's like, oh, okay, well he's obviously seen this before me. So like shit like that is like, I mean, that's just jarring. And like, I mean, I can handle it, I guess, but should I really have to? I already have to handle watching a corrupt organization's fucking broadcast. Don't make me handle also terrible production, please.
Surely it's got to be, casters are in with the players, right? And so they're like half the continent away. Because I think it's being done in Katowice.
Yeah, because it's like Malta and Katowice.
Yeah, for the desk. So I would imagine they're just trying. They've got like a minimal sort of skeleton crew or whatever in Malta. Yeah, I don't know. I think the way that you fix that is you get a hub where maybe you can have people. I don't know. Or do we have like the group stage and then they take the full production team out to Malta for the But is it going to be a crowd for the playoffs? I don't think so.
I don't
right?
think so.
I mean, as far as I mean, maybe not all the playoffs, but they are going to have a crowd. Like, it is a live event.
Yeah, but it's not in like an arena, right? It's just in a studio. Is that correct?
Yeah, don't know what the venue is.
Yeah, I think they're still trying to figure out, like, making Pro League also not remote by getting your logistics sorted and stuff like that. So I think that there's just a few issues of we can't really know for sure, but yeah, I think if they can get Odin-Say or whatever, and you've got everyone there and the analyst desk, and they're near with the player, and I'm sure the desk would love to be there. They'd love to be able to chat with the players properly and maybe make a bit of content with them or whatever. That's not just sort of ahead of time or whatever it may be. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely agree. It still feels like a COVID era type broadcast, but they've got the major coming up. You got the two angles of saving money for that because it's going to be a bit expensive, even if it is subsidized. They've also just expanded all that. Not that they may well have known that going into Pro League. Who knows? And then also the fact that you kind of want to save yourself for the big event. What I will say on the format thing, I'd love a bit of a double down. I like the idea of EPL and where it's at. You got loads of teams and they've now moved conference a lot closer, so that hopefully there'll be a bit of a ramp up and people might be a bit more interested in conference to see these teams play against their own field and how do they perform. So that's kind of cool. But I think when we have all the teams, you got to run a bit of a format like this where teams can get the most out of it, especially those newer names that you may be trying to give a bit of a platform. But I will say, I think for the playoff, like just go for it, mate. Just get the goddamn bingo balls and be like, Faze, and then G2. Whoa, in the first round of playoffs? No way. It might remove some of your excitement for the later stages, but I think that just go for it. Make it a standalone kind of product that Pro League is it's all the Counter-Strike all the time, 3 games a day, and it's its own sort of product. And then it's like, right, Katowice, one of our premium products that will be, in essence, you've got a bit of obviously it's the major this time, but usually for ESL, there's kind of a filler event in between. And then you've got Katowice in February. And that'll be, we saw how teams did at Pro League and they got a bit upset there, but this is the bee's knees. And here's the format. It's banging, and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they can test, they can tweak certain bits of it because you have the largest sample size at EPL. It may also be cool in future seasons to see them mess around with the format and change the format of EPL pretty regularly so that they can pick and choose bits that are effective for their, bigger events.
I think theoretically as well, I mean, you want kind of like an ESL Pro League relegation, so maybe even what conference turns into at some point, like teams that make it out of conference, there's 6 teams, there might be the bottom 6 teams inside, like, go to the lower division, which I'm sure the partner teams wouldn't like, but that could be an eventual evolution of how things could run. I just found it so funny when they were doing the playoff draw for ESL Pro League, they had like 2 balls inside a bowl and they were just like spinning them around like, ooh, I wonder what I'll get. Like there's only 2 options. It's like it's a 50-50 here. If it doesn't take a genius to track which bowl is, like, it didn't seem like it probably was as random as they could have made it, but it could very well have been manipulated because of the fact there's only two balls. Like, oh, I just have to remember that Mouse is here and Heroic is here, and then like, it's not that complicated, So they could have gone for a whole bingo ball angle thing, but they wanted as well, like, the top team to have an advantage and move into the semi-finals first, and then the quarterfinal teams go up against each other. So I can understand why it would look like that. It just looked kind of stupid, They also didn't want teams that played in the same group to play against each other. So there's a lot of like additional conditions that have to be met for where the bracket placings are, right? And like they wanted to make it so if you were in the same group, it took longer for you to play someone you'd already played before.
There is some of, like, these sort of draws have led to some of the most, like, chef's kiss esports schadenfreude you'll ever find out, which is in League of Legends. There was a Worlds, I think it was like season 5 or so, it was a long time ago, where TSM, the reigning, like, worst fan base of all time potentially, organization, had they thought they were starting to celebrate because they got drawn into a group that seemed really easy, but then because of some like obscure ruling of like can't put this team with that team, they got moved to the hardest group, and so they're celebrating because they're watching it live, and then you just see the fucking despair creep on their face, like, oh fuck. we just got moved to the group of death. There's shit like that, like, again, we're missing out on stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if it would happen the same way, but there's the opportunity for something like that to happen. That would have been choice if we could have seen, like, I don't know, like, I want to know what Complexity think about having to go up against Faze, for example. Like, that would at least be interesting after they were celebrating their asses off for reaching playoffs to begin with, So it's like a before and after, it could have been a nice comparison.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the thing. If they can hopefully, like, find a hub or indeed find a way to make it a bit more profitable to get everyone in the same place, then yeah, you can have a bit of a show, even if it is just very short. And if they're worried, if you get the players involved and you're like, yo, we're gonna have all the captains or whatever, like, and a bit more Flashpoint-esque, like they did initially at Flashpoint, right? Before the COVID times. That would be kind of cool, and that would get your viewership in, and you get a few more personalities out, and it's like, so Carrigan, what do you think about the fact you're facing Complexity? And you can build up that kind of who, and then Complexity be like, come on, man, we're looking well good, and
we've been playing good.
We are playing the Counter-Strike.
We got rid of Junior. Everyone said we should.
I really I do grieve for the loss of Flashpoint, dude, because some of the, like, what we're dealing with, like, awkward teenagers who play Counter-Strike, right? But they were picking it up. Like, again, I always tell the immortal story of Guardian doing the shit talking. I've never heard Guardian do English speaking shit talking before, but like they were playing against some NA team, I think, that were like popping off, and then when they started a comeback, because Guardian was standing in for I forget who on Dignitas at the time, but so Guardian comes in for that, and he just goes, yeah, maybe, and he just goes, why are you quiet? It's just like, dude, come on, I need that in my life. I need that. Yeah. I need, like, I don't necessarily need Smoothie Dolphin screeching, but I'll take it if that's the, like, I like when he was screaming at MIBR, he's like, peek me, bitches, or whatever. Like, that's funny. Like, I want to hear shit like that.
It's like the environment needs to be open to that, right? And I think ESL's just necessarily isn't at the moment. Is kind of
we need something. We need something. Like, what we're missing in the esports broadcast space is something that does welcome the shit talking. Like, they had a WWE writer or somebody trying to, like, help them out and be like, hey guys, you really got to channel this, and, like, eventually they would have gotten really good at it, and it would have just been like, it would have leaked over to everywhere else these guys went to as well. Like, we just didn't get to see it. Like, imagine if that. Again, they might have to reel it in other tournament organizers or whatever, depending on the broadcast, or maybe there'd have to be some, like, bleep that player, please, like, be on the ball or whatever. Like, I don't know, but it would have been really compelling to watch the personalities unfold as the playing, and it would have been even a skill, like psychological manipulation or whatever, it's like the mental warfare game is something that we don't really see too often. We're starting to see a little bit of it with the Blast show off, where they're, like, facing each other and stuff, and like the
tunnel cam.
Yeah, and it's also they have, like, some weird glass thing that, like, shades in. They have, like, something that make it more transparent and then also more opaque. And so, like, between rounds you get to see the opponent, and then it comes back in after freeze time. That's really cool. We need shit like that to, like, get these players to show their personalities more. It's probably, like, the least well tapped into aspect of esports for me, or of Counter-Strike specifically, because we don't have to be, like, family friendly. It's a game about fucking terrorists, dude. Just let us hear let it rip.
We're not. We're a little bit, the bastard child, in a sense that, I don't want to get a CS team because it's got blood, and they say terrorists win and stuff. Like, so, you kind of lean into that. If Valve ain't going to do it, or if a TO can't find a way around it, then, indeed, just lean into it a bit.
I think the TOs have probably, like, soft leaned away from it. Like, I don't think we use the nomenclature or terrorist or counter-terrorist
that's
frequently.
True.
I think most people use TCT and just, or, like, attack, defend, even though those aren't the names for it. Like, we use that in our verbiage just because it makes more sense for the sponsors and the audience, right? Like, let's not draw too much attention to the fact that there is killing on screen. Like, it's not really the main focus of it. Call of Duty has killing on screen as well, but that's really, like, there are still brands that have never approached CS that are in Call of Duty instead. There's not the same kind of crossover.
Well, Call of Duty also goes way harder with its themes, I think, too, which is kind of funny. I mean, like, the broadcast
they actually emulate wars.
But it's like, here's my more realistic weapon. Here's my fucking, like, Operation Sandstorm or whatever. Like, what the hell? Like, what are you guys doing? How is this getting sponsored? But, like, we can't get a sponsor for Mirage. Hello. Oh no, it's not Mirage, not the Leet crew. Like, fucking Leet crew, bro.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are not
the Spetsnaz or something instead. Like,
Yeah.
use the up 4.
Yeah.
who just, it's like,
Oh yeah, Rainbow Six Siege and other examples. Like these guys are actually like
Breaking
terrorists
into
and trying to
houses and
yeah, rescuing hostages and like disarming these giant bombs and stuff that are like way more in your face than just a C4 or whatever.
And you'll see like a nice, this is sponsored by Arby's. It's like, where is that in Counter-Strike? Why do we...
I feel like the sponsors is one angle. Definitely like on the team level though, I feel like maybe they're just using it as a bit of an excuse because the teams are expensive and they don't want to say that they don't have enough money or whatever for a team.
Well, Nadeshot was out saying like, oh, it's really hard. It's like, what? You had a fucking organization and they were even a partner org. Like, what do you mean it's hard? You already did most of the work. You already did it. Just keep doing it. What are you doing? So.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. But I don't know. I can definitely get on board. I think that we're always, look, we talked about it with Moses last week. We're always going to want the broadcast to be better and all this. And there's lots of obstacles and there's lots of, but I guess just so long as the voice is there and the opinion keeps coming through, that indeed there are certain aspects that could be better and could be improved and all that. But I will say, to borrow his point from last week as well, we do have to, and I do it a lot, so I kind of get it, and I think that's why it resonated with me. You do have to be careful that we're our own thing. It's like this whole idea of a draw show and a podcast and a bit of a talk afterwards is difficult. It's easier in conventional sports, especially like, from my angle of watching the British sports or whatever, because it's on TV. And it's like you've got an hour and a half slot and people will set bits of reminders or, be like, oh, I'm going to tune in to the usual slot that's usually a game, but this week it's not a game, it's the draw, whereas it's different in CS. That's another big problem to get over in fairness is like 3 BO3s in the middle of the week. What's happening? The viewers are only getting older.
You're paying for those TV channels as well. So
that's
you're
true. That is very
to
true.
actually tune in more often instead of just a Twitch stream where you could get easily distracted.
You can't watch it back after time, after it's been on. You could maybe watch like a little highlight package on YouTube.
Or like on demand or something.
Yeah. But also we don't have like 60-year-old men who maybe can't figure out how to work the box and everything, and like don't know how to go back and record and all this kind of stuff. So I definitely feel like that's another aspect, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely have to be careful with where we're talking about conventional sports. And I think that's just me projecting a little bit to make sure that I don't keep talking about conventional sports all the time. But yeah, look,
about actual playoffs.
Sure. Yeah, that's where I was going, baby. Don't worry about it. I certainly think that with all that being said, it's a pretty good little playoff field. There's a few cool storylines in here. We've seen some teams that we want to do well, and not too many crazy sort of what's happened here then, G2 have bombed out of groups again, and that means that we've got a free pass for X, Y, and Z team. That means right at the top, it is that one that we've kept bringing up, Faze and Complexity. Probably for me, the clearest cut in here, I would say. The rest of those opening games, there's potential for both teams. But yeah, I feel like, look, Complexity looking better, for sure. Complexity definitely looking better. Halzerk seems to have given them a bit of energy that they definitely needed. There's still moves to be made, but where do you go in NA, etc., etc. For me, though, yeah, it's a healthy little spot. Second best team in North America, not including Brazilian squads, maybe, like purely, North American organization and majority team. I think is that something?
Yeah, it's probably safe to say.
Yeah,
I would say so. I mean, the only other one is obviously Liquid, and they brought in some European muscle recently. So I don't know, like, is that legit? But obviously, Complexity also rocking Halzerk, so it's like a kind of a through line. I do really like the fact that this team seems to be a little bit more on the clutch side, but they're going. This is like when Liquid was trying to be tactical and going up against Astralis for me. It's like, oh, Complexity, you want to be clutch, huh? Well, how about Faze, the most clutch team of all time, perhaps? It's like, yeah, okay, well, this is obviously like a David versus Goliath situation. However, I don't think the Philistines. We've brought up David versus Goliath a lot on the show. I don't think the Philistines are going to be coming away with this one correctly. I think you're going to see a squished Complexity after the giant feat of Faze. So. I don't know. For me, I just think there's so much of a mismatch here, but I hope that Complexity can make it close in at least one map. I hope that maybe they bring all their energy and they make it like they lose 16-12 or something. You know what I mean? That would be honorable first start. The problem is this team has had a number of blowout losses on individual maps, even if later on they've made comebacks or whatever. They do seem to have like, you know, maybe Faze isn't the most like the best team for just gunning straight ahead to a victory, and maybe they do let you back in a few times or whatever. Like maybe they don't play from ahead too far super well necessarily. That's like a critique you can levy at this squad historically. But like against Complexity, I don't know if they'll have any problems. It doesn't seem like it. They didn't really show that much weakness against like the lower table of teams, besides obviously like there was a couple of snafus in their group. But you know, if you predict that they're just warmed up now, like the one angle is it's been a while since Group A and Group B, like those first two groups, it feel like a long time ago now. So maybe Faze is now on the side of it where they're like, oh shit, like it's been a while. I think Complexity is like the dream warm up for them, because even if they go close on one map, like I'm hoping Complexity do, you can just chalk that up to, oh, we're getting warmed up in the tournament again, and then move on. Plus, you know, people have talked about this before, but the fact that the Grand Slam is right around the corner for these guys, like that's gotta motivate you a little bit. So obviously I think it's not controversial to take Faze for this, but probably a 2-0, probably a 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Complexity guys, but I don't like them that much.
Yeah,
You know, like I'm not. I think with my heart, sometimes when it comes to predictions, but even my heart is telling me that FaZe will probably win it. So, you know, I agree. I hope that they win one map or make one map at least close, or you know, try and get into the good graces of the general audience, because it would be good for their confidence. You know, it feels like they're on the right track anyway. That's about all I can say, really. You know, it feels like FaZe Cloud9 is kind of a predetermined factor.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually good that I've just noticed we have they are the second game on Tuesday. So they are not the first game, even though they're in like the first round or whatever. It says playoffs round 1 and they're at the top. That's pretty, if that's deliberate, I don't know if that's just how things fell. It kind of makes the most sense, because you could maybe see the next game, which is actually the first game, Liquid versus Fnatic, on HLTV. That's the second one there. You could sort of see that one maybe going 3 maps. Probably unlikely that the FaZe Complexity one does, so it's actually good that they were structured out and left that to the last second right there. You know,
Also,
a little bit.
NA audience tune in.
Oh yeah, well, listen, they obviously don't care about that. YouM3, come on, they've been scheduling the games in such
I know, but
times.
now they finally appease you, and now you're playing the cynical card. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's almost like these people have left me nothing but cynicism after being acquired by people in this world. No, I will say, it's pretty good that at least it'll be a little bit later. I have had to wake up at like 6 a.m. to catch some of these games, so it's as a result, I have not caught some of these games.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, from all angles, all perspectives involved, 2 BO3s a day is, you know, kind of the way it is, timing wise, workload wise, etc., etc. I think it's just the magic number, really.
Especially when you have this many, you know, broadcast talent, they have enough to just put one duo on each game, basically. Like that does seem like a superior format, and by necessity, they had to run, what was it, 3 a day for the longest time. That's obviously going to be pretty bad. Now we can maybe have a higher quality of observing and production and all this other stuff, because the team's not overworked as much. We can hope anyway. So yeah, with any luck, we'll have just like a higher quality broadcast to watch, as well as obviously the game quality is going to get up as well. You know, you'd be more than forgiven if you didn't tune into every single EPL game. Like, there's not necessarily a huge point to doing it. There's a lot of some that are just kind of pointless for one team or whatever. Like we were talking about the Cloud9 Liquid example at the end of Group D. It's like one of these teams has nothing to play for, really. Like, there's going to be all these mitigating circumstances, but at playoffs, single elim, like, you expect these teams to bring their A game. So it is pretty exciting. And I guess on that note, what do you guys think of, if we're ready to move on from Complexity FaZe, what do you guys think of this Fnatic roster and how they stack up against Liquid? Because I said earlier, Liquid might have gotten a really easy opponent, but they might also have not. Like, this team did impress when they were taking a map off of Navi and doing all this other stuff in their group. So
I think when you consider, like, I think Group A and Group D are probably the most legit groups. Or maybe, actually, no, I'd say Group B is probably the most legit group, but I'd sort of discredit maybe some of Group C, like the opponents that they're playing against. Like,
oh, sure.
Ence have looked terrible. Heat look not great. Astralis have been kind of on and off and never really consistent enough. Like,
yep.
I think it's easier to discredit someone like Mouse or Complexity in terms of like what they can do against the teams in the other groups versus what I think either Liquid or Fnatic could do. My only problem I have with this Liquid roster is that, like, aside from Yakindar hard carrying like a motherfucker,
Yeah.
like, is that consistent moving into playoffs? Like, in the maps that Yakindar hasn't performed, Liquid have lost. So if he is the sole win condition and he doesn't have activation, then yeah, I actually, for my money, I would take Fnatic. I actually think that they are a more stable team in a shorter period of time than the Liquid team currently.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, they're definitely there's a bit more. They're a more well-rounded team. Let's say they maybe know a bit more where their wins are coming from, and they can work with more structure in terms of the game plan or whatever. I'm pretty on the Yakindar train, at least for this game, and maybe the next one as well. To be fair, I think that they could find themselves through to the semis relatively easily if indeed those things go well. I think Yakindar will again like keep playing to that kind of level. These two games, particularly the Fnatic one for me, I don't think that it's a point to prove, right? And I think I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it is out there and I've just not checked. I'm not sure how long he's signed on for this team, but especially at the moment with where the landscape is at, I don't know that he necessarily looks at this team and thinks that it's going to be, the be-all and end-all. I feel like they could indeed hit like a top 3 by the end of the year if all the cards go right. At the moment, the card that's not going right is OC, and it's a really dangerous landscape at the moment if you don't have a reliable AWPer. But I do just feel that Yakindar, he's kind of putting the for sale sign out a little bit, also getting some decent money while he's here finally, a nice totally different environment where he probably gets loads of the resources and has a lot of the say, etc., etc. Like, this is just a perfect move for him. Get out of the kind of difficulty that's going on in the other side of the world right now. And also, I do think that the way that they're setting him up is really solid and getting some of, his best Counter-Strike out of him. The issue is, I think that comes also at the expense of other parts of this team. Yeah, already mentioned OC. The big part maybe behind that is, AWPing is one thing, but also there's a few spots on some maps and, some plays that they're rolling with where he's not on the AWP.
Yeah.
And I think that for me might be you got to bear in mind that this team for the longest time was without an AWPer. And then when they got one in, it wasn't really all that hot, at least at the tier 1 level. So I think that they maybe are a little unsure of how the modern AWPer should be fit into a team and should be used super effectively alongside a superstar rifler as well. So I think that there might, still be something at the footnotes of this team and the strat book of this team in terms of how they play and approach and, move forwards. I do feel like, look, man, there's still a budge to happen if they really, really want to be, and stick to the NA. Maybe it's IGLing. I'd never really rated the Nitro move back in. And now, indeed, as you're kind of saying, YouM3, they've got Yakindar and it's a bit of like duct tape around it. It's like, just brute forcing their way in, which is good enough for groups of a tournament like this. But is it good enough? I feel like like he should be for the early stages of the playoffs. But is it a long-term thing? Probably not. Because as Yakindar he's very good and he's very hard to work around and read and all that. Inimitable is the word that I always use for this guy. But eventually, people may well feel that they're going to have to start to pay attention to him. And then it gets very, very different to have like a solo carry kind of vibe. Yeah. But on this game, I think they can. I don't know. I just feel like the Fnatic roster don't really have anything that pops. We could talk about Yakindar for like 20, 30 minutes if we wanted. I don't know that you could do that about... You probably couldn't even talk like 10 minutes about any of the Fnatic players. I don't know that they have... Fasha's got potential. Mezzi was really hot, but now he's in-game leading.
I think some of that's recency bias because it was many weeks ago that we were even looking at this Fnatic roster. I think that's maybe part of what lends into it because they're also a fresher team as well. Like there's less to talk about because they are newer and they've also made their way into the playoffs. There's going to be an element of, okay, after all these weeks, have they improved even more? Because that is probably what has happened. I think the comparison I'll make is that I actually liken the Yakindar move to something like Furia. Like, even though Yakindar may be not the one calling, he's playing just as aggressive, even more so than somebody like Art did when Furia was involved. And we saw some of the difficulties that came with Furia in terms of finding an AWPer that could keep up and actually run the system like they wanted it to. Once Henny was out of the picture, who else could you get to fill that role? Safe isn't that guy. Furia have actually dialed down their aggression a fair amount since they've had these AWPing struggles. Is that not something that Liquid have to consider as well if they have got some superstar rifling talent like Yakindar, Naf, Elige? I think all those guys can keep up fine. Yeah, maybe Nitro does fall behind, but we're willing to cut some slack to the in-game leader, aren't we? But if there is going to be that difficulty, should they not be slowing down? Should they not be setting up OC to be a bit more successful? Because this year has been rough for OC, that much is true. But his performance has gotten worse after Yakindar's joining. Not better. It has not even stayed stable. It has got worse since Yakindar joining. And I can only imagine that that's part of the factor, is that this isn't a pace that he's used to. He's usually involved in sort of picking apart the map. Kind of like, I remember when we spoke to Fang about it, he was saying like him and OC used to work areas of the map together, and they would collaborate extensively to find these picks, and that would be how they structure the rounds. I don't think OC's in that conversation anymore. I think it is a lot to do with like how they set up Yakindar to find this pick. And that works, but it kind of takes OC's best strength away from him if he's supposed to be a collaborative or sort of like, I guess, area work monster on the AWP, as opposed to being like running after his riflers.
Yeah, no, I think he's best utilized, at least historically, when he's used to crowbar open sites on the T side and like, or just like strategically deny areas of the enemy. And with the accelerated pace where he's not only not used to his own team's timings, he's not used to the opponent's timings for that time. It's like, where could they be? My normal brain is like checking the jump on like overpass A site where they're jumping past the SWAT van to see if they can see me down long. I'm checking that in my head. Meanwhile, he's like close right by the sign and he's dry peeks me and I'm dead. You know, it's like shit like that's going to happen to you when you're not able to like remind yourself when you're still learning what you actually need to be approaching the timing wise. I do feel like this Liquid roster has changed a lot. It's been, in terms of their strat book, it doesn't feel like they've been particularly stable. So like on the one side, that's a good thing for avoiding being anti-stratted. On the other side, if you are more of a systems opper or somebody who like has had success, like you were saying, YouM3, where you've got a partner and you're sort of like working an area, trying to make sure that it's clear, trying to make sure that you can maybe get a pick or something. If you're used to that playstyle and you're now not just being told to adapt to whatever playstyle we have, but also that playstyle that we have is now changing a bunch in some very significant ways because we're trying to bed in Yakindar more permanently or whatever. That to me is like, no wonder OC would be struggling there. You know, some people have said maybe it's resources. Obviously, he doesn't even get the op, like Scriv was saying in some of these gun rounds. But I think maybe that's like a symptom of the fact that he hasn't been excelling at the playstyle that they're trying to work in or whatever. So like maybe that he's not getting the op as much because he's not having as much success, and then he's not having as many opportunities, so he can't even really practice it, and then they change the playstyle anyway. It does seem like a bit of a cycle. So I don't really think that Liquid can, like, I think they're a fraudulent top 4, if we're going to use that term, like if we're going to talk about like HLTV ranking. I don't think that they really can hang at that level for too long. They should be able to beat Fnatic. Obviously, Fnatic don't have the team play issues or like the instability that YouM3 was referencing. And maybe that is like a benefit. Maybe that allows it to go 3 maps. And also, Liquid hasn't necessarily looked super mentally stable either. And there was some talk from Yakindar where he wasn't really happy with how the team has sort of maybe taken the foot off the pedal after the player break, and they haven't been practicing as much as they want to. They're in playoffs. It's time to shape up, right? So, obviously we're talking about a game that's going to be running tomorrow as of the recording of this video. So that's one of those things where it's kind of crazy to think about, like, who knows how it could be. But for me, I just look at that and I think, yeah, Liquid should take this game. Honestly, if Liquid are playing well, they should probably be able to take MOUZ and go all the way to semis before they reach any significant challenge. Because as much as MOUZ has impressed lately, I don't really think that, like, and if you really want to take somebody's honest HLTV ranking, Liquid's probably above both Fnatic, handily above Fnatic, and definitely above MOUZ as well for me. So that's one of those things where it's like, this is almost like this crop of teams that we're talking about, the Liquid, the MOUZ, the Fnatic. that's like the crop of teams you would expect to maybe win or reach finals in a tier 2 event or something. You know what I mean? Like these teams are a little bit closer to each other maybe than I'm making it sound, but at the same time, they are not the world elite. So to think of you being able to get to a semi-final berth at EPL based on this group draw, like Liquid actually could be just running straight through if they're, if their opponents aren't careful enough, if they can't adapt to Kinder's aggression, if OC maybe looks a little bit better. Obviously he missed some sitters in the Cloud9 game that I saw. I think that's been a hallmark of his struggles overall, is that he will be trained on somebody and then he'll whiff and die, or whiff and have to trade after the fact or something. It costs his team some games, or costs his team some rounds at the very least. So that's like easy to point at, is like binary. You get the kill or you don't. You could have gotten this kill. Definitely easy to levy blame at that point. But yeah, for me, it's just like, I don't see the path to improvement, as Scriv was saying. I don't really see a path to stability with this particular lineup. But I also don't think that it makes sense to let OC go somewhere else, because now you're just giving some domestic rival this powerful systems upper because you didn't want to work him into a system. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of how I feel about it. So I don't know what the future is for Liquid, but I do think that they could theoretically make semis. And it's not even really that theoretical. I feel like it's almost like if they beat Fnatic and they look good doing it, you probably take them as a lock.
Maybe. Yeah, the Mouse stuff is kind of unpredictable with where they're at.
It's good word for it. Yeah.
They make their way through, a pretty nice group from them.
Can't even predict when you're going to be benched. It's crazy.
True. It's a dangerous world to be in a Mouse player, but yeah, I definitely, you don't know how far this kind of takes them. I think they're on that young, hungry honeymoon kind of period. Dexter's finally got a few pieces to work with, and whatnot. They've not really built up their own opinions yet. They come from a bit of an academy system, so they're probably like, "Yep, we got to listen to the in-game leader because he's the boss," rather than what little frictions can get caused, and then in-game leader, actually your style doesn't work, so let's do this. And at the moment, it seems to be, maybe if those types of conversations come up, it's like, see ya, I think that they're a bit unpredictable. So I don't know. I also think that Liquid should be able to beat Mouse, but I really don't know what to say about that team. The sky's kind of the limit a little bit with them, and we'll see what the new blood can do. I'm
really amazed that Dexter's had such a long tenure on Mouse at this point. Like, pretty crazy.
I mean, I think I might have mentioned this before. Did we talk about Group A? I don't know. I feel like I've talked to you guys about this. But I feel like this is finally Dexter's team to prove that he can make it work. Like,
yeah, sure.
Before he was the replacement for Carrigan, which is not a very fair 1-for-1 when he's coming over from Australia, and Carrigan is one of the greatest in-game leaders we've seen.
That's like lucky for Device, dude. Easy.
Yeah, I mean, it just like logically doesn't stand out. I thought Rops performed poorly under Dexter's leadership. I don't think he actually listened to Dexter. I don't know the intricacies, but it didn't look like he was trying to.
He was probably
win.
checked out. He's like, I'm
like
accepting the Faze offer.
Yeah, it felt like Frozen and Bemis were trying to win still. And even Acor, I don't think was the same. And I think that's one of the things I will tie into the Liquid discussion, is I actually think that even just the psychological nature of having someone like Yakindar take over Team Liquid. You think about how long Elige has been on this roster. You think about how long Naf has been on this roster. OC is supposed to be the prospect that everyone's talking about. And now it's Yakindar's team, where he's not even supposed to be really out of the Outsiders, but he is, and he's in this, like, that's a whole other thing as well. Like, they've pulled him through back channels to get him into this squad. He's taken over.
Oh, yeah. And just like the Cloud9 move, right, from Gambit. Yeah. It's like...
And he's the superstar, like, players have egos. I'm not saying that that's what's at play here, but players have egos. So to have everything just completely shift around one person who, he might be your fucking Michael Jordan of the team, but people fucking hated playing with Michael Jordan. Like, people hated playing with Kobe. This might be a similar circumstance where, like, you have to try and perform your role as best you can while also appeasing what is ultimately like the new captain of this team, even if that is not the official title that they would give him,
sure. I don't know. It's weird because all of the interviews have been like, we love Yakinder. He does our secondary calling, our entry
but when I hear news coming out of China, there's usually a lot of very positive things to say.
Okay, sure.
I'm just saying, like,
I get
you're not gonna upset anybody in the workplace. You're gonna you'll say it in the back channel.
And obviously, the big thing is that once it stops being successful and it's not honeymoon period, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's great fun playing with him. He's really cool. But then when it's like,
Meanwhile, Steam chats are opening up. Steam chats are opening up everywhere.
yeah, but it's like you choke the semi-final of the major or whatever, and why didn't you? I told you to peak and you didn't peak, and then it's like, kaboom. So we'll see.
I will say my
about
comparison was
2K
probably a
talking
little
to
out of
Fallen.
whack. My comparison was probably a little out of whack. I will say.
I get your point.
I thought about it more, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
you're not gonna over-publish your
The
hatred
point
for a
the
guy.
point's there. It's just kind of the extrapolation.
Yeah,
is a
I
little,
kind of pulled it too full scope.
Yeah,
to
we've
be
all said a few things like out of context that might be deemed uncool. So
Scriv, you got a lot of YouTube shorts out of this episode.
yeah, true. That is true. Just hold the content for a rainy day or whatever, or for a bit of cheeky blackmail. There's another one out of context.
Just a little bit cheeky blackmail.
Yeah.
Just a cheeky black.
It's probably a bit of a chop up on this one, but that's fine. That's how we like it. In fairness, maybe we need to get a producer along to timestamp things, but I don't think we're quite at that level just yet. Heroic Na'Vi then, fellas.
Okay. This is a weird one.
Yeah,
because
'cause-
I am not confident in Heroic, and I'm also at this event not confident in Na'Vi.
It's kind of the worst looking forms of these two teams I think that we've had in a little while. Heroic still do okay. They only went down to Mouse, but again, it's that whole kind of thing. Group C's like, you kind of have 3 easy games there if you're Heroic, and even then, Astralis, there's no fans around, so it should be an easy time, right?
Yes. Yeah. No. This is the one for bragging and bragging rights start now. Oh, we lost that now. It's
Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like Na'Vi, it's a weird situation. They've got the big man coming back, and not super comfortable. Sundai Young's still not technically really in the team, but he is at this point. Like it's a fair journey for him if he's not going to be in the team. So I don't really know. You still got Electronic getting comfortable with the IGL in, and again, it's a pretty big test when you're doing these EPL group stages, because new look Vitality, you got the hot young gun that's going to pick all them up. Fnatic, you've not really got much experience against this form of the roster. Endpoint, who are they? And then obviously you lose to them. And
classic.
Again, it's like Spirit is everyone's after the player break. You've got your own shit that you're dealing with, but then also there's all these. It's not just like Simple's taking a break in the middle of the season and then you come back and it's the same old Faze. It's the same old Vitality. It's the same old G2 that you've got to deal with. It's like it isn't. It's all these teams are very, very different. So you've got your own shit. Then you've got to put your money where your mouth is from the scrims and the practice and all that in the officials. So I can definitely kind of see why they were a bit flat. They were a bit lackluster. That being said, it's actually only 2 wins from them. You know what I mean? It's like, what's happening here, guys? Like we shouldn't be losing to Endpoint ever. Like, I love Endpoint, great organization, but that was also a team a little bit in flux, right? They got rid of Surreal after this event.
Yes.
That I think was probably in motion before the event occurred. And it's not like it was some crazy, I just went and checked the map page to make sure. It wasn't some crazy overtime and, what a pop-off performance from Nerds. Or it was like 16-7, 16-10. They got a bit shit on, actually.
They got rid of Crucial, not Surreal.
Ah, my bad.
Yeah.
No, that makes more sense.
I was like, wait, when did they get
That
rid
makes
of
more
Surreal?
sense.
Actually, yeah.
Sorry. Insider, no, I'm joking. But, yeah, anyway, they made a move. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that they knew that was coming. So I don't know. The Endpoint loss is just so unbelievably whack. And this form of NIP, Na'Vi should be beating this form of NIP for sure. And yeah, so they actually only get 2 wins, guys, which is not just, they've only come 3rd in the group. It's like they are in by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, and
they have a losing record.
Yeah,
it's like to the bad teams in this group too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they 2-0'd Spirit to open things up, right? And then it was like, okay, then it's a 2-1 against Fnatic. They're on the rise. They take you scary. All right. Lost to Vitality, you can kind of understand. But that's like after the loss to Endpoint. Like, what is going on?
Just think about this for a second. you're NIP. You don't know what's going on. You're having a rough day at the office. The group is going poor. You beat Na'Vi. Okay, you're out of ESL Pro League. Oh, we're making roster moves. Oh, okay, well, no shit. Okay, Endpoint. You're also having a pretty rough day at the office. You're in the group stage. You beat Na'Vi. Holy shit, that's fucking impressive, guys. We don't usually beat Na'Vi. Oh, we're also making roster moves. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So what's the why is that just like the crossover? Like the two teams that shouldn't beat Na'Vi, and then it's like, oh yeah, guys, I think we need to change things up because they are they are objectively bad. It's just kind of a weird correlation.
Well, that's the thing is it's not like, again, what Scrip's point was, and
Mhm.
I guess what your point is too, Yumi, is like these teams are not
It's
impressive.
just- they're not-
The fact that they're the ones to beat Na'Vi is like,
And it's not
what?
even in impressive fashion as well. That's what
Yeah.
I'm kind of saying. It's like the games themselves are all, you know what I mean? It's like this is
they're poor.
this is an absolute career performance for one of the individuals or something, or it's like, you know, that timeout at the perfect time, or that 50-50 moment that took it to overtime, got the reset, and then, you know, Endpoint were on their strongest. It's like Nerds did play pretty well across the course of the series, right? Guys really cool, but yeah, they just like ruined them, you know. And let's have a look here. The NIP game 2-1, so they do get a map, but 16-8, 16-11 on the maps that they lost on. You know, it's really flat. Like pure numbers wise, sure, but the whole team looked a little bit dejected, not really into it. And we had this conversation when Thorin was on a bit, like, what is going on with Simple actually? Is he sort of playing some kind of gymnastics around like, oh, I could leave if I want, I could go stream, to be fair, I got my major, you know. And this guy streams, and some games he gets more viewers than EPL itself, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I don't really know what's going on within the team, but it does look all. And look, there is also the ever current
Political landscape
situation right now that it's like, Simple tweeted out the other day that it's like, it's the first time I've seen my mum in like 3-4 months or something
since
like
it
that.
started, yeah.
You know, so at least in a like safe and solid and human face-to-face capacity. So just that's also wild, and that doesn't just affect the big man. Let's be real, that affects like the whole team, some more than others, but ultimately no one wants there to be a war other than the fucking puppeteers. So
that's something we didn't even I didn't even think about it until you just brought it up. But do we, like, Monesi really should probably fast track that Serbian citizenship at this point?
Yeah,
when
there's mobilization rights.
Yeah, I mean, he's
still
underage, I think. I don't know what the age limits are, but like,
surely got to be 18. He might be
sure,
there soon, though.
Yeah,
he doesn't want to get that fucking letter on his 18th birthday. You know what I mean? Like,
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Want a all expenses paid trip. See ya.
Yeah. I don't know.
By the way, I don't want to listen. I like edgy stuff, but can we just remember when there were like countless Reddit comments at the outbreak of the invasion, and people were like, "Can't wait to hear tales of Simple's multi kills IRL." I was like, bro, what are you doing? Like, I'll say it quoting somebody. I'm not gonna say it myself. That's fucking lunacy. What is it?
Yeah.
Like, I guess whatever happens, you know, when in Rome on the internet, but still, like, that's. I can't. I mean, I'm sure the guys.
Reasonable.
Yeah, I'm sure in general, like reading assuming. I mean, we know these players read social media. That of all the things to you don't even want to read the fan opinions when you lost a game or like open your DMs under those circumstances. Yeah, you're probably not going to be. It's not good for your mental health to read on anything other than the game either, really. So just steer clear of that. Maybe Simple's break was enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. You didn't play particularly well.
I actually think that Heroic are just going to get owned by Na'Vi.
It's probably true. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I'm giving it to Na'Vi. Do I want it 2-1 or 2-0? And I feel like even though Na'Vi have not looked convincing, we've seen that slow start to them in loads of tournaments. This probably could be just a 2-0. Like, Heroic just don't look convincing to me at all, honestly.
Yeah, I'm just thoroughly unconvinced. And when I put into context, like, yeah, they beat Astralis, they beat Heat, they beat Complexity, they beat Ence. Like, Ence were supposed to be a competitor team within this group. They were, but they weren't, and they haven't been still. You know, they were in the blast qual things that I was covering as well, and they looked all sorts of out of whack. You know, Valdez still on lurks outside. Some Pius is completely detached. Like, everything is just. It looked so outside of the normal Ence playbook, and I don't know what's going on in the team. Like, in all honesty, it just does look like Diha is the only shining light that's left on this roster somehow, and they've just signed 2 star players to go into it. Like these aren't great T side players traditionally, but they have to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, the Ence one's definitely a weird one. I feel like Valde's been riding that for a while, and he's shifted around. We talked with Snappy with it a little bit as well, where like I feel players are like, yeah, maybe you got to be reasonable and you know err on the. But Valde, there was probably a point in his career where he needed to really start taking those good spots and you know trying to build himself up to the star and get himself out. And he has been a bit unlucky and whatnot, but I think he's just sort of riding for a long while now. I don't think he's as good as the tenure or the hype. It's not really, you know, it's not massive, but you know what I mean. Just sort of the energy behind him. And then yeah, Sunpius, I think it's environmentally very very different. That whole Movistar Riders team, and we saw them in their own group where you know they looked totally dejected. They looked okay in the opening game that they had. And then they lost like 16-3 or something on Ancient. Really didn't go well. Their own map pick, and from there it just tanked. So I feel like they're a very, it's like family brotherhood, you know, and the passion and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very different kind of environment that to be a legit top player in a legit top team, which is what Ents are going for. I think is obviously an area that Sunpius is massively untested in.
Well, I was definitely on the Ents train when they announced these moves, and now, like, I don't think this is going to happen. I do think there will be an error correction, but it does kind of smell to me a little bit like when JKS replaced Obo and Complexity, and everybody was like, "Holy shit, they won!" Like Jason Lake had the tweet video where he was in the like hot tub or something, and he's like sipping a martini. He's like, "I love it when a plan comes together," or some line like that. And it's like that's just because everybody was saying this is like a like for like, but more experienced and more veteran and more stage tested. Like basically, this is what Obo could turn into as a player if he's given enough time. And yet you're just going to upgrade basically, or at the very least it'll be like 1-for-1 with more of a ceiling. Like maybe we can bet him in more, but we can have him take up a lot of the same positions or what have you. And then obviously we know how that story ended, was not very good. Now in this case, like, is Valde going to have the same sort of vibe? Is it going to be the same for Sunpius as well? Like, I'm not sure. I don't like, the thing is there's always going to be an adjustment period. But at least as far as their opping is concerned, I haven't really seen that much of a difference in output between Sunpius and Hades. Hades was a bit more like trigger happy, I think. But, you know, and maybe sometimes that was a streaky or like, you know, it took a little bit of time to make sure that it would be consistent and what have you. And sometimes he was having an off game or he would get figured out by an opponent. Maybe it's easier to anti-strat that kind of play style. Like these are all fair critiques. But it was still like, when he was on, he was on. It's kind of silly analysis, I guess, but it's like there were times where he was used well and where he was able to elevate his own game. And now with Sunpius, there's going to be this adjustment period. How aggressive can he be? The fact that he isn't going to be as trigger happy as Hades was, I think to me is like one of the main things that's going to be a tough part about this rebuild for Ents.
Yeah, when I looked at Valde and Sunpius, I immediately knew the CT sides were going to look better.
Yes.
Just because Sunpius, very good stable CT AWPer, Valde, very good CT player in general.
Yeah.
And the decision making from those two, I think, is good. The problem that I have is that Valde is taking T side roles, very similar to what Spinks is doing, and effectively trying to slot in 1-for-1. From my understanding, you know, he's playing this hard lurk role, and that's something that has to come intuitively to a player. It's not something that Valde really did on OG. It's not. He was usually a part of the pack. And for him to now go into a completely different role and try and find the right timings to get these kills or the right conditions to meet, to find like somebody looking the wrong direction or something, like those are going to be hard to adjust to instinctively. Like there's a lot of demo work that has to be done. There's a lot of playing those scenarios that has to be done. It's why it's like finding players that are good in lurking positions in today's game is actually very difficult to do. Spinks is one of the anomaly players that is just kind of on the come up, become this person. And you know, I imagine a large part of that was working with Snappy for 2 years across different rosters. You know, coming from Contact to then Vitality or to then Ence. I don't know why I said Vitality. But yeah,
Snappy didn't get the call up. He didn't replace Apex.
But I will say, I think Sunpius is maybe the output isn't as good or isn't as like high as you maybe would have expected, but he is a better AWPer. like hands down, than Hades. He just needs to be able to find the right pace. And I think I do believe in this Ence project, but it is going to be probably a few months before we see them actually do anything with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, we hope that they can make it to the major, obviously, because it'll be quite the come down to go from.
I'm not even sure
semis
that they'll
to-
make it there. I actually don't think they don't have enough time to get good enough.
Yeah. It's all a bit fast, isn't it? I think that it's funny. We have a player break. It is only a month, and you don't know. It's like they did a boot camp. It feels like maybe they just sort of did that, and then there was a bit more time off had and whatnot, and they needed bringing 2 players in. They needed more time on it. They had a few weeks before getting into their pro league group. I don't know, man, but it's disappointing, and I think Ence is an org that a lot of us are behind, and we want them to do well. So when they don't, it definitely is a disappointing one. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a big shift up. They have a little bit of time, I guess, now by virtue of not making the playoffs before the RMRs and whatnot to work it out. I think they could get in there, but I think it will be a tough squeeze. I don't think they'll be as clear cut as maybe they were in the last major cycle. You know?
Yeah.
Well, they only have to make
before.
it top 8 is the thing, right? So looking at the pool of teams, it feels like they should. I mean, obviously on paper they should have been more competitive than they were so far anyway, right? So it's hard to say that they should be able to find. But like, I don't know. There's probably their group also has a little bit of trouble because obviously there's the benched heroes stuff where it's like, Onkir hasn't been able to make it apparently, and so they're trying to like figure stuff out and maybe do a little bit of that classic Twitter pressure on the TO, the same way Simple did with his mold. Just fucking what is going on over there? So yeah, there's a couple angles you can take on that. I don't know. For me, I just think this roster should succeed. But yeah, like what Yumi said, is there enough time? Because the matches for this start pretty soon, right? It starts on the 4th of October. So yeah, that's like a little bit over a week from now, so it's not a lot of time.
Indeed. All right, let's move on to the last one then. Furia or Outsiders. Probably I feel like the maybe one of the more open-ended ones, but also the 2 teams that I perhaps give the least shits about. To be honest, I don't know why I needed to wreck them, but I felt the need that was a good segue apparently. But yeah, I don't know.
Listen. Furia is not the best. Like they have not looked particularly stellar leading up to this event. Now they managed to make playoffs, which is maybe something. If you looked at any other group and you put Furia there for some other team, you might say, oh, it's pretty contentious. But in this group, they should have. Like. Who's going to contest against them? It's like EG, Eternal, Fire. Like these teams shouldn't be better than Furia, right? And so like when you think about it like that, it's pretty hard to say, oh yeah, they wouldn't make it out of playoffs. So like based on their group, they kind of did what you'd expect. Maybe you would have expected them to squeak out in 3rd instead of Liquid, but instead they got 2nd, which is great. I still don't think that they're like, I wouldn't rate them as somebody who goes deep in this event. I mean, they're not going to make it past Vitality. I can say that fairly definitively. Whether they make it past Outsiders, and by the way, I think at some point they're going to be rebranded back to VP now that their ownership has changed. Well, there's a whole separate like drama about that. But whatever the case may be, maybe we can stop calling them Outsiders soon. This team is obviously in a weird spot, not just organizationally, but because they've done this roster rebuild. People are saying, obviously, Maui Snake had a video out yesterday where he was talking about the playoffs and he's talking about Outsiders specifically. He mentioned James basically has to be considered like a very high tier IGL. He's for me, I would liken him a lot to Jerry over in Forza, except obviously playing at a higher level. It's like this guy's built so many different iterations of a CIS team, and now is being able to make it to playoffs of a tier 1 event, right? So admittedly, it's a group stage. There's mitigating factors. Is it different? Whatever. But I think the Outsiders group was a little bit more like spooky in that sense. Like definitely didn't have to be them that made it out over Big, for example. Maybe you could even say MIBR could get a cheeky couple of wins or something. So like it's not a foregone conclusion that they would make it out the same way that I think it is for Furia. And so maybe in that sense you might rate them a little bit higher. Stylistically, the matchup is really interesting. It could be some interesting games because obviously you got Art and the aggression and how do they handle that? Meanwhile, it's like if you had to compare Art to James, these are like the most bizarre fucking like mirror universe people of all time. It's like here's the guy who saves and here's the guy who just literally throws himself at you. All right, man, I don't know about that. So it'll be interesting. I think this is probably a series to watch at least the first map on, see if they end up being competitive. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. It is a hard one to predict. I'm leaning Outsiders. I don't know what you guys think.
I'm probably leaning Furia. I feel like. Yeah, it is a tough one. It is a tough one to call. I just feel like, Furia a little bit more, for me, looks kind of impressive. I think that we've had, Flit, Jame, but still these newer members are getting a bit more comfortable and again, maybe a bit more of a legitimate group, but then they pick up the wins that perhaps you'd expect and lose the games that perhaps you'd expect, right? Like you mentioned, Big sort of the only one in the middle there, whereas like Furia, to be fair, the Liquid victory I think is a pretty legitimate one from them.
Sure.
They came close against Cloud9 on one of the maps, right? So I'm liking Furia. I think that the clash of the styles is maybe a big question around how that goes. Generally speaking, you can look as well if you want to go just super bare bones on it. The Furia usually get the upper hand in this matchup. It's a different looking Outsiders, I suppose, but I feel like the younger guns, recent additions, whatever you want to call them, are not going to be as comfortable here. And K-Srao has been pretty lights out this event as well. So yeah, I don't know. I still feel like Drop for me is not really doing it. Safe is also, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, Yumi said, also not really doing it. But I think
Not
they'll
the guy, yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll win this one, but drop to Vitality. But I'm open to be wrong. Where we can really put all the chips in on some of the other playoff games here.
Yeah, you already said you didn't care about these two teams. So like,
well, I suppose
50-50, one of them wins. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, but
well, that's the thing is if they were going up against Mao's next, then it's interesting because then they can be the one to get semis, right? But
sure,
Vitality, I don't think so. I don't think either of these.
Well, yeah, there is that, and then there is just also like I don't know, man. Furia, they're cool. They had a fresh style, but now everyone sort of knows how it works. I think Furia are at the spot that you'd expect, like right just around the top 10 in the world. That's the HLTV rankings kind of getting this one right. But yeah,
Rarely.
I feel like they win, as they did in their group. They win against the teams you expect. Maybe they drop a Mac, but they're generally they're a safe bet, and then they come up against some competition. It usually doesn't go so well. They have a stopping point, and they've not really that like years ago prior to COVID. Maybe you could argue that they were able to get over that hurdle and break into like the top 5 for a little bit. But usually they'll have that tough matchup, and it's like, okay, well, they're nice map. It was their pick, but they still lost it, and then they're just gone.
It kind of feels like they need just like the perfect storm, whether that's
sure,
like teams out of form, or whether it's like the playoff bracket they receive for them to ever win one of these events. I think it is unfortunately where they currently sit, because I don't see them toppling many of the top teams, but they'll make them very interesting games. I think that's what we've always characterized with Furia, is that their games are never boring. But I actually would lean on Furia as well for this one. I don't know that I've been overly impressed with the development of Outsiders. It has been growing, but it has been, I think, slower than you would have hoped. But that is the Outsiders' MO, isn't it? So it is. I do believe that they'll come up with enough creative solutions. I do agree, though. It is probably one of the more exciting playoff games to watch. Like, I don't think I'll really watch much of the Complexity Faze game. I don't think there's going to be much to take away unless you look over and you see, like, wait, Complexity won a map. But, you wake up from the dream. And then you maybe have like Liquid, Fnatic, and those are the ones I'll be looking at mainly. And maybe I guess the last those 3 at the bottom of the playoff bracket are probably more exciting than any of the first ones we talked about. But it is all about the semifinals teams at the end of the day. If we're really thinking about like deep runs, the fact that you're saying that, but there's no way they get past Vitality, then we have to also think about that conversation of like, does a Fnatic get past the Mals, or does a Liquid get past the Mals? And I think the answer would be probably yes. And yeah, I think if we're going back to that sort of idea, that like, does a Faze get past the Cloud9? Are all of these results possible? And I would actually those would be more arguments that I'd be willing to have, in fact, not just as straightforward as maybe some parts of the playoff bracket.
Sure. All right.
Seems pretty comprehensive there. I mean, the main thing is that like these two teams, neither of them are, I think, contenders. It would be great if Furia could achieve some great form ahead of the Brazil major, but
yes,
I don't know if that's real. You know,
that's true. So. That is true. I'm hopeful for them. I think they'll do well there. Just
Imperial will save us.
You kind of have to. Well, I don't know, bro.
Or Fluxo.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
They're not even in the armor.
There's a lot of Oplano.
Yeah.
They got my guy Zeus out. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, he can't. Of all the teams to come out of retirement for.
I know. Yeah.
Apparently, he was. I can't remember if it was EG. I think it was G2. Thorin was saying that like Zeus could have popped in a G2, and then they were like, no, but I have to fuck my rival or whatever.
Something like that.
See how that worked out for you at the very end. Vitality seems to be sitting pretty over there. Like,
who's the real winner? You know.
Comes full circle, man.
Indeed, as it often does, mate. As it often does in these shows. I'm happy with that. We had a good chat, maybe a little bit longer than we were expecting, talking about the Tater boys, but nonetheless, good fun. And we did get to talk about Counter-Strike in the end, which is always the important thing. But I'm going to close it off there, fellas. You know, I'm a little hungry, I won't lie to you. So I think it's time.
After all the talk of taters, we got to.
Well, this is true. This is true. Time we got away and time we said goodbye to everyone. But yeah, great live show as well. Appreciate if you've been sat in watching the whole way through. And as always, a lot of fun. Thank you very much, YouM3, for coming on. You know, always a pleasure. It's always good chat, and I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future. But from us here at The Off Angle, that's going to be it for this episode. We will catch you next week.
You're going to love this video right here. You're going to love it. Check it out right now.